A young millionaire on his way to an important meeting saw a beggar with a baby in the rain. Without hesitation, he gave her the keys to his house. When he returned, he entered without knocking and was horrified by what he saw. It was a busy day in León, Mexico. As Rubén moved through the hall of one of the country's most important architecture events, the contrast between the luxury around him and the purpose of the evening was striking. Although the event was filled with glamour and ostentation, it was actually a charity event organized to raise funds for social housing projects. Renowned architects, including Rubén, had donated designs and plans for these projects, and the evening was dedicated to raising resources to turn these plans into reality, giving the elite an opportunity to make a significant contribution to society. While for some it was just another occasion to show off their wealth and status, Rubén did not go unnoticed. Known as one of the most talented architects, his presence was as notable as the projects he signed. Despite his success, people talked about the change in his personality after the sudden loss of his young wife in an accident, and the fact that he cared for his sick father. Some saw him as a cold man, but those who truly understood life's burdens knew it was just his way of coping with adversity. Amid the event, Rubén encountered Sandra, an iconic figure in architecture respected for her vast experience and achievements in the field. "Rubén, it's always notable to see a professional of your caliber here," she said with a keen look. "I've heard that despite your intense work, you've dedicated yourself to caring for your father. That's admirable." He smiled politely and nodded, but couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider in this world of appearances. Sensing his discomfort, Sandra remarked, "These events can be superficial, but sometimes they reveal more than we expect. What brings you here today, Rubén? It doesn't seem to be just for professional contacts." Rubén gave a sad smile. "My presence here is more of a duty than a desire. You know, my life has never been just about architecture. It's been shaped by much more human experiences and lessons I learned from my father." Rubén paused, remembering the tough days. "My father, despite the hardships, always found ways to help others. To others, he was a simple man with a huge heart. He raised me alone, and every sacrifice he made was a life lesson for me." Sandra listened attentively, her expression reflecting respect. It's rare to find someone who maintains such values, especially after achieving the success you have. Your father must be an incredible man. He is, Rubén replied with a proud gleam in his eyes. He did a bit of everything to support us, from fixing things for the neighbors to giving private lessons. He always said that the greatest wealth of a man isn't in what he possesses, but in what he can offer to others. Sandra nodded, understanding the depth of Rubén's words. That explains a lot about who you are, Rubén, and how you conduct your life and career. Many here could learn from that. Rubén smiled, grateful for Sandra's words. "I just try to live in a way that makes my father proud. He taught me that the true architecture of life is about building bridges between people, creating spaces of understanding and support." Sandra smiled with genuine admiration. She too had started her life simply, studied hard, and reached one of the highest levels in the profession. Yet despite it all, there was a sadness in her eyes. She had not started a family, and that part of her life remained very private. After leaving the architecture event, Rubén headed home, a place that had become more of a refuge than just a living space. When he arrived, he found his father, who now lived with him due to his illness, watching a late-night program. Despite his health challenges, Mr. Gonzalo maintained a vibrant spirit and an active mind. "How was the event, son?" he asked with an interested look. "Did they manage to raise a good amount?" "It was very good, despite the atmosphere of people who think they are gods because of their money. It was a success. I even talked with Sandra about the importance of our work for society, Ruben replied, sitting down next to his father. After their conversation, Ruben stood up and headed to the kitchen. I'm going to prepare something to eat. Do you want anything in particular? He asked over his shoulder. Anything is fine, son. Don't trouble yourself too much over me, his father replied with a grateful smile. Later, while helping his father settle in for the night, Ruben mentioned his plans for the next day. Tomorrow morning, Dad, I have to travel for that meeting about the new project. I'll leave everything organized here, and Mrs. Martinez promised to check in on you, Ruben said, helping his father settle comfortably in bed. Mr. Gonzalo looked at him tenderly. You're a good son, Ruben. Go and do what you need to do. I'm proud of you. Mr. Gonzalo had faced countless hardships in the past. After Ruben's mother left them, he took on the enormous responsibility of raising him alone. Despite financial difficulties, he always prioritized Ruben's education, firmly believing it was the path to a better future. All the money he earned was invested in his son's studies. With determination and dedication, Ruben seized every learning opportunity, becoming the renowned architect he is today. Even after achieving success, he never forgot his father's struggles and sacrifices, always staying by his side and caring for him with the same love and gratitude he received in his childhood. The next morning, Ruben woke up early, preparing for the important day ahead. He dressed meticulously, choosing a smart suit suitable for the crucial meeting in a neighboring city. As he headed to the car, a torrential rain began to fall. The driver, already familiar with Ruben's schedule and habits, was waiting. It looks like we're going to face some rough weather on the road, Mr. Ruben, the driver commented as he approached. The traffic in the neighboring city was chaotic due to the heavy rain. Ruben's car moved slowly along the congested road, watching the rain pound against the window, lost in thoughts about the meeting. Then a scene on the side of the road caught his attention. A woman, clearly a beggar, was holding a newborn baby, desperately trying to shield it from the relentless rain. It was an image of despair and vulnerability that deeply touched Ruben's heart. Without hesitation, Ruben said to the driver, "Stop the car, please. I need to help that woman." The driver, knowing Ruben's compassion for homeless people, cautioned, "But Mr. Ruben, you'll get soaked and ruin your suit, and we still have a meeting to attend." Ruben, determined, responded, "I don't care about the suit or the delay. That woman and her baby need help now." He opened the car door and stepped out into the rain. Ruben stepped out of the car and into the torrential rain. Approaching the woman, he asked, "Can I help you? You and your baby can't stay here in this rain. Do you have anywhere to go, a home?" The woman, still surprised and shielding her baby from the rain, quickly replied, "No, we have nowhere to go." But she didn't elaborate on her situation. Ruben felt an urgent need to act. Without hesitation, he ran back to the car through the pouring rain and asked the driver to open the glove compartment. He took out a bunch of keys and returned to the woman. Introducing himself briefly, he asked, "What's your name?" "Consuelo," she replied, holding her baby closer to protect her from the rain. "Consuelo, this is the key to my father's house. It's nearby. He's living with me now, so the house is empty. You can stay there with your baby," Ruben said, handing her the keys. "I have to go now because I'm late for a meeting, but my driver will take you there." After giving the keys to Consuelo, Ruben quickly returned to the car, already soaked from the rain. He informed the driver, "I'm going to walk to the meeting. Please take Consuelo and her baby to my father's house. It's close by. Stop by the market and buy everything they need. Food, clothes, diapers, anything." The driver, familiar with Ruben's acts of kindness, nodded promptly. "You can count on me, Mr. Ruben. I'll take care of everything." After saying goodbye to Ruben, the driver returned to Consuelo, who was sheltering her baby from the rain. Approaching her kindly, he said, "Let's go. Don't worry. I'll take you to a safe place. Mr. Ruben wants to help you and your baby." Consuelo looked at the driver with a mix of fear and distrust. "I don't know you. I've seen on TV what can happen. I can't trust you just like that," she said, holding her baby tightly. Understanding her hesitation, the driver tried to reassure her. "I understand your fear, but I assure you, Mr. Ruben is a man with a good heart who only wants to help. To show my sincerity, here are some photos of my own family," he said, opening his wallet to show pictures. "See, I'm a father too. I've worked with Mr. Ruben for years. He's a man who truly cares about others." Consuelo observed the photos and the driver's sincere expression. Though still cautious, she began to feel that this might be a real opportunity for refuge and safety. Finally, she agreed to go with him. Carefully, she got into the car, shielding her daughter from the rain, while the driver took them to Ruben's father's house. Before that, they stopped by a market to buy food and diapers for the baby. Late in the afternoon, after a long and productive meeting, Ruben left the building to find his driver waiting for him. As soon as he got into the car, Ruben asked, "How did Consuelo and the baby do? Did they get to my father's house safely?" The driver replied, "Yes, Mr. Ruben, but I dropped them off at the beginning of the street. I thought it would be easier to maneuver the car." Ruben, a bit surprised by the driver's decision, gently reprimanded him. "You should have dropped them at the house's door, especially with this rain and a small child." He paused for a moment, reflecting, then continued, "It's okay. It's been a busy day for all of us. I'll stop by there tomorrow to see how they are and make sure they have everything they need." As Ruben looked out the car window, he felt concerned about the well-being of Consuelo and her baby, but he was confident he had made the right decision to help them. When he arrived home, he had barely opened the door when he was greeted by Mrs. Ramirez, who took care of his father in his absence. She seemed to have unexpected news to share. "Mr. Ruben, your father, Mr. Gonzalo, took a copy of the house keys and went there as soon as you left. He said he wanted to spend a few days there and was feeling bored and a bit better," she reported, somewhat hesitantly. Ruben was surprised by the news. "He went alone? But he knows he shouldn't," he began, concerned for his father's health and safety. Mrs. Ramirez interrupted. "Yes, he went alone. He said he waited for you to leave because he knew you wouldn't let him go otherwise. He seemed determined and said he felt well enough to be alone for a few days." Hearing about his father's sudden decision to go to the other house where Consuelo and her baby were staying, Ruben immediately thought of the potential complications. Without hesitation, he asked the driver to take him there urgently. As the car sped through the streets, worry grew in his chest. When they arrived at the house, Ruben saw the door open and an ambulance parked outside. His heart raced as he saw his father being carried on a stretcher. Ruben rushed inside, panicked, trying to understand what was happening. He approached the paramedics and introduced himself. "I'm his son. What happened?" The doctor, looking at Ruben calmly, explained, "Your father had a stroke. Fortunately, your wife was here and acted quickly, calling the ambulance. She saved his life." Ruben felt a whirlwind of emotions: relief that his father was alive, gratitude that Consuelo was there, and a deep sense of fear. He accompanied the stretcher to the ambulance, determined to be by his father's side in this critical moment. Still in shock, he watched the doctor load his father into the ambulance. As soon as the vehicle left for the hospital, he turned back to the house to find Consuelo and her daughter. Ruben approached them, trying to control his nerves after the scare with his father, but the worry was still evident on his face. "Consuelo, I don't know how to thank you for everything you did. The doctor thought you were my wife," Ruben said, trying to lighten the mood with a slight smile. Consuelo, sensing the seriousness of the situation, replied softly, "There's no need to thank me, Mr. Ruben. I did what anyone would do. I was in the right place at the right time." Ruben noticed the groceries she had bought, seeing that they were only basic items. "I see you only bought the essentials. You could have gotten more." "You don't need to limit yourself," he remarked, concerned if she had everything she needed. Consuelo looked at him, a mix of gratitude and hesitation in her eyes. "I didn't want to take advantage of your generosity. You've already done so much for us." There was a moment of silence where Ruben felt a deep, human connection with Consuelo. "Consuelo, I'd really like to know more about you and your daughter. How did you end up in this situation? If you're willing to share, I'd like to listen," Ruben said, expressing his genuine desire to understand and help. Consuelo sighed, seemingly deciding whether to open up. She looked at her daughter, then at Ruben, and began to speak. "I never knew my mother," she started, "and I grew up with a father who felt more like a stranger. He drank too much and barely noticed I was there." Ruben listened attentively, sensing the strength in her words. "I wanted to study, but my father never allowed it. I read in secret after he fell asleep, dreaming of a better future." Consuelo paused, recalling those moments. As time passed, life only got worse. "My father sank deeper into his drinking, and I tried to help but couldn't. He was a rough man who scared me most of the time. Until one day I met someone," she continued. "He seemed perfect, kind. We were together for a while until I got pregnant. At that moment, I was very scared, but thought I would finally have a family." Consuelo sighed, the pain evident in her voice. "But he left me as soon as he found out about the pregnancy. He disappeared, and I never heard from him again. I managed to hide the pregnancy for a while, but when my father found out," Consuelo hesitated, "he was furious. He didn't let me explain and kicked me out of the house with nothing." "How did you survive?" Ruben asked, his voice filled with concern. "I begged. I lived on the streets, and when my daughter was born, it was the street people who helped me. I was scared, distrustful of everything and everyone, but I had to be strong for my daughter." Ruben looked at Consuelo, seeing not only the pain and fear in her face, but also an incredible strength. "You are incredibly strong, Consuelo. Your story is one of immense struggle." Consuelo smiled sadly. "I had no choice. Life wasn't kind, but I couldn't give up for my daughter. I would face it all again." "I don't know how to thank you for all this," she continued, her voice breaking with emotion. "When I saw all your father's books, I felt like I was in heaven. I love reading, but I never had access to so many books." Ruben smiled kindly. "You can read all you want, Consuelo. Consider them yours too." As he prepared to leave, Ruben turned to Consuelo, extending an envelope. "Here's something to help with expenses," he said softly. Consuelo looked at the envelope, feeling the weight of the paper. She opened it cautiously, her eyes widening at the amount of money inside. "Ruben, this is a lot. I can't accept all this," she stammered, her voice trembling. "Please accept it," Ruben insisted with an encouraging smile. "You need it more than I do. Buy clothes, food, anything you and your baby need." Tears welled up in Consuelo's eyes. "I don't even know how to thank you. You're giving me more than help. You're giving me hope." There was a moment of silence, during which Consuelo looked at Ruben, a thought forming in her mind. "Can I ask, are you married, Ruben?" Ruben sighed, a shadow passing over his face. "I was," he began. "My wife died in an accident just a month after our wedding. That was 3 years ago." Consuelo brought her hand to her mouth, surprised and saddened by the revelation. "I'm so sorry, Ruben. I had no idea." He nodded slightly. "It's okay. It was hard, but I've learned to live with it. The pain never completely goes away, but we learn to move forward, right?" Consuelo nodded, feeling an unexpected connection with Ruben through their shared experiences of loss and struggle. Ruben stood up, taking his keys. "Well, I have to go now, but please, make yourself comfortable here. And if you need anything at all, call me." "Thank you, Ruben, for everything," Consuelo said sincerely. He nodded, a sad smile on his lips. "Take care, Consuelo. And remember, you're not alone." With those words, he left, leaving Consuelo sitting there, wrapped in a mix of gratitude, hope, and a new feeling of not being so isolated in the world. Ruben returned home, his mind full of thoughts about the encounter with Consuelo and her story. The next day, he visited his father in the hospital. His father was in stable condition, but still needed constant care. Sitting by the hospital bed, Ruben began to tell him about Consuelo and her daughter, recounting the details of the day he felt ill and how she had called the doctor and saved him. He also spoke about how difficult her life had been. Ruben's father listened attentively, his face showing signs of emotion. "You did something very good, son. Consuelo seems to be an incredible and brave woman," he said weakly, but with pride. "It's good to see how you've grown. To be a man with a good heart. I thank God for not abandoning me when I asked for the strength to raise you alone." There was a comfortable silence between them, each lost in their thoughts. Then Ruben's father, looking thoughtful, spoke again. "Don't you think it would be better to bring Consuelo and the baby to live closer to us? They could stay at our house. I would like to have more life around, and you wouldn't have to travel so much to see them." Ruben considered the suggestion. The idea of bringing Consuelo and her daughter closer seemed appealing, and the possibility of his father having more company at home was also attractive. "That's a good idea, Dad. I'll talk to Consuelo about it. I think their presence would bring more joy to our home." Ruben's father smiled, excited about the possibility. "It would be wonderful to have a little girl in the house. It's always very quiet when you're working." With this new idea in mind, Ruben said goodbye to his father, promising to seriously consider the proposal and discuss it with Consuelo. He left the hospital feeling hopeful, thinking about the possibilities the future might bring for them. After a long day working on a major project, Ruben was exhausted but determined. He drove to the house where Consuelo was staying, thinking about the proposal he had in mind. When he arrived, he found Consuelo tidying up the living room with the baby playing quietly on the floor. "Consuelo, I have something important to discuss with you," Ruben began, sitting near her. Consuelo looked at him curiously. "What is it, Ruben?" He took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. "My house is big, and since my father fell ill, it has been very quiet. He loves to read, and I thought that since you also enjoy reading, you could keep each other company. Plus, he could help you with your studies if you like." Consuelo seemed surprised by the proposal. "You mean living in your house, me and my daughter?" "Yes," Ruben affirmed. "It would be incredible to have your presence and the babies in the house. I think it would be good for my father. He would feel less lonely, and you would have a safe place to stay, plus access to all the books you want." Consuelo was silent for a moment, clearly reflecting on the offer. "That would be incredible, Ruben. I don't know how to thank you. It would be a great help for me and my daughter, and I would love to be able to study." Ruben smiled, relieved and happy with her response. "Then it's decided. Let's do this. I think it will be good for all of us." With a grateful smile, Consuelo accepted the proposal and quickly gathered her and her daughter's belongings. Once they were ready, they returned to Ruben's house, her heart filled with hope for the opportunity to study and make something of herself. As they entered the house, Consuelo couldn't hide her surprise. "Wow, Ruben, your house is amazing. You really are a talented architect," she exclaimed, looking around with admiration. Ruben smiled gratefully. "Thank you, Consuelo. I hope you and your daughter will feel comfortable here." In the following days, the relationship between Consuelo and Mr. Ramirez, Ruben's father, grew closer. He had a vast collection of books and eagerly began showing Consuelo those he found most interesting. Mr. Ramirez took an old book and said, "This was one of my favorites when I was younger. I think you'll like it." Consuelo took the book, flipping through its yellowed pages. "It looks fascinating. Thank you for sharing this with me, Mr. Ramirez." Seeing the special connection forming between them and Consuelo's dedication, Ruben decided to let go of his father's caretaker. Consuelo had insisted on taking care of Mr. Ramirez when Ruben wasn't home. She cared for him with a mix of respect and affection, and Mr. Ramirez greatly appreciated her and her daughter's company. Consuelo always emphasized how much she enjoyed her new life. "I love taking care of your father, Ruben. You've been so kind to me and my daughter. It's the least I can do." Ruben nodded in gratitude. "You're already part of the family, Consuelo. My father and I are very grateful to have you and your daughter here." As Consuelo settled into Ruben's house, he made sure to offer her not just a home, but also financial independence. One day, while they were chatting in the kitchen, Ruben brought up the topic. "Consuelo, I've been thinking," he began. "I'd like to pay you a salary. You've been amazing taking care of my father and the house, and I think it's important for you to have your own income." Surprised, Consuelo looked at him. "Ruben, that's not necessary. You're already providing a home and everything my daughter and I need." "I know, but it's important to me that you feel free and independent," Ruben insisted. "I want you to be able to buy what you need for yourself and your daughter without having to ask." Consuelo felt a lump in her throat. "Thank you, Ruben. This means so much to me. I haven't felt this valued and free in years." From that moment, Consuelo began receiving a regular salary from Ruben. For the first time in years, she experienced financial autonomy. She could buy clothes for her daughter, choose new books to read, and even save money for the future without feeling dependent or having to ask for permission. This newfound freedom brought a sparkle to Consuelo's eyes, and she felt more confident and secure. Ruben's kindness and respect provided her not only a safe home, but also the opportunity to rebuild her life with dignity and independence. Over time, the relationship between Ruben and Consuelo grew more intimate and affectionate. Ruben enjoyed spending time with Clara, the baby, and Consuelo, and often went out for walks together. During those moments, Ruben shared his passion for architecture with Consuelo, and she showed genuine interest, absorbing every word. Consuelo also dedicated herself to reading the books Ruben recommended, deepening their connection. The affection they shared began to transform into something deeper. In her heart, Consuelo already felt she was in love with Ruben, but kept her feelings to herself, unsure of how to proceed. One day, Ruben found himself talking with his father about his feelings. Sitting on the porch, watching the sunset, Ruben said, "Dad, I think I'm in love with Consuelo. It's the first time in years I've felt this way, but I don't know how to act." Ruben's father, with a sympathetic smile, looked at him and said, "Son, life is too short for doubts. If you feel this way about Consuelo, you should tell her. You deserve to be happy." Ruben reflected on his father's words. "Do you really think so? What if she doesn't feel the same way?" "You'll never know if you don't try. And from what I see, the way she looks at you says a lot," his father encouraged. Inspired by his father's advice, Ruben decided to talk to Consuelo. He wanted to express his feelings and discover if the affection he felt was reciprocated. With a mix of nervousness and hope, he planned how he would approach the subject with Consuelo, wishing more than anything that she shared his feelings. That night, after putting Clary to bed, Consuelo sat in the living room reading when Ruben approached and sat next to her. his heart pounding in his chest. The comfortable silence was broken by his soft but hesitant voice. "Consuelo, can I talk to you about something important?" Ruben began, looking into her eyes. Consuelo put the book aside and turned to him with an attentive expression. "Of course, Ruben. What's going on?" Ruben took a deep breath, searching for courage. "Lately, I've been feeling something more for you, more than friendship. You've brought a new light to my life, and this house. I care about you and Clary more than I ever thought I would." Consuelo felt her heart race, surprised and excited by his words. "Ruben, I feel the same way about you. You've been amazing to us," she responded, her voice trembling. Ruben took her hand. "Consuelo, I want to be here for you both, not just as friends, but as someone who truly cares. I would love to be part of Clary's life, to take care of her as if she were my own daughter." Consuelo felt tears forming in her eyes, moved by Ruben's sincerity. "That means so much to me. Clary and I already see you as part of our family." From that night, the relationship between Ruben and Consuelo blossomed. Consuelo started to attend to social and professional events with Ruben. The reactions from people were varied. There were malicious comments circulating, with some referring to Consuelo derogatorily as the beggar Ruben took in. In several places, people looked at them with disdain, whispering among themselves. However, Ruben remained indifferent to these judgments, always by Consuelo's side, who felt increasingly confident and secure with him. At one of these events, an elegant cocktail party at an art gallery, Mrs. Sandra, a well-known figure in Ruben's social circle, approached the couple with a polite smile. "Ruben, Consuelo, it's a pleasure to see you here. I've heard about your relationship and want to congratulate you," she said, maintaining a cordial demeanor. Consuelo thanked her, feeling a bit tense under Sandra's watchful gaze. There was something in the way Sandra observed her that made her feel uncomfortable, but Consuelo kept her composure. Sandra continued, still with her critical gaze fixed on Consuelo. "It's always a pleasant surprise to see new faces at our events. Consuelo, you have a very unique presence." "Thank you, Mrs. Sandra," Consuelo responded politely. "Before I forget, I'd like to invite you both to a dinner at my house next week. It would be a pleasure to host you," Sandra said, looking at both of them. Ruben hesitated for a moment, feeling a certain moral obligation to accept the invitation despite not being particularly thrilled about the idea. He exchanged a quick glance with Consuelo, seeking her silent opinion before responding. "It would be a pleasure, Mrs. Sandra. We accept your invitation," Ruben said, offering a polite smile. Sandra seemed satisfied with the response. "I'm looking forward to hosting you. It will be a lovely evening. Until then," she said before walking away, leaving Ruben and Consuelo alone again. As soon as she left, Ruben looked at Consuelo. "I'm sorry, I thought we should accept. I hope it's okay with you," he said, a bit worried. Consuelo nodded, supporting his decision. "It's fine, Ruben. I think it will be an interesting experience," she replied, trying to appear optimistic. Together, they continued enjoying the event, though the prospect of dinner at Sandra's house lingered in their minds, mixing feelings of curiosity and caution. The day of the dinner at Mrs. Sandra's house arrived, and Ruben and Consuelo prepared for the occasion. When they arrived, they were impressed by the beauty and grandeur of the house. It was evident that Sandra was a renowned architect. Every detail of the decor was carefully planned and executed to perfection. The aesthetics were impeccable, blending modern and classic art harmoniously. Upon entering, Sandra warmly welcomed them and invited them to sit. As Consuelo admired the interior, she couldn't help but notice a certain emptiness in the atmosphere. Despite the beauty, the house seemed to lack warmth and coziness. Sandra lived alone in that enormous mansion, and the space did not convey the feeling of a happy home. "What a beautiful house, Mrs. Sandra," Consuelo commented. trying not to show her perception of the atmosphere. "Thank you, Consuelo. I dedicated a lot of effort to every detail," Sandra replied with a proud smile. Sandra watched Consuelo attentively, an enigmatic look on her face. At one point, she began to talk about her personal life, revealing details of a difficult past. She mentioned how life had been unfair to her in her youth, leaving Ruben and Consuelo confused about the purpose of the conversation. Sensing there was something deeper behind Sandra's words, Ruben asked her to be clearer. "Mrs. Sandra, excuse me, but I'm a bit confused. Could you explain why you invited us to dinner tonight?" Sandra sighed deeply, as if gathering courage, and stood up to get a photo album. Returning, she opened the album and showed a photo of herself from many years ago, visibly pregnant. Ruben and Consuelo looked at the photo, still not understanding the context. "Where is the child?" Ruben asked, trying to connect the dots. With tears in her eyes, Sandra looked directly at Consuelo. "The child is here. It's you, Consuelo." Ruben and Consuelo were shocked by the revelation. Consuelo looked at the photo and then at Sandra, trying to process the magnitude of her words. "I am your daughter?" Consuelo asked, her voice trembling with emotion. The revelation that Sandra was Consuelo's mother hit like a bombshell, leaving everyone at the table in shock. Ruben expressed his disbelief. "That seems impossible. Sandra, Consuelo never knew her mother. How can you be sure she's your daughter?" Still trying to process the situation, Consuelo looked back and forth between Ruben and Sandra, unable to find words. The idea that the woman sitting in front of her could be her mother was something she had never imagined. With eyes full of emotion, Sandra began to tell her story. "When I was young, I met Consuelo's father. He seemed like a good man, despite his problems with alcohol. We were together, and I got pregnant. But after Consuelo was born, he changed. He became aggressive, and the day we left the hospital, he took her and disappeared without a trace." Everyone at the table listened in silence as Sandra continued. "I tried everything to find her. I hired investigators, spent fortunes, but it was as if they had vanished. There were no traces, no clues that led me to her." Consuelo absorbed every word, feeling a mix of emotions. The anger at her mother's absence in her life clashed with the understanding of the pain and desperation Sandra had experienced. "So the man who raised me actually stole me from you?" Consuelo asked, her voice trembling with the weight of the revelation. Sandra nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Consuelo. He took the greatest treasure of my life, and I've spent all these years searching for you." Feeling the tension in the conversation, Consuelo, still dazed by the revelation, looked directly at Sandra and asked, "How can you be so sure that I am your daughter? Why only now?" Sandra, with an expression of relief mixed with pain, responded, "When I first saw you at the event with Ruben, something inside me stirred, a hunch I couldn't ignore. You have a birthmark on your hand exactly like mine. It was the last physical sign I remembered of you." Sandra continued, her voice choked with emotion. "After that day, I asked a private investigator who has worked with me for years to find out everything about you. The pieces began to fit together. He finally found your father, drunk on a street, a shadow of the man I once knew. The investigator approached him, offering more drinks, and in that moment he managed to get your father to talk. That's how he confessed everything, telling the truth about how he took you from me. The fact that he never registered you and didn't work officially to avoid being found was revealed. He was living in hiding, trying to erase any trace that could lead me to you." Consuelo listened in silence, absorbing every word, every detail. It was as if a veil was slowly lifting from her life, revealing hidden truths she had never imagined possible. "He lived a life of hiding, afraid of being found, and kept me in that shadow with him," Consuelo said, understanding the magnitude of what Sandra was recounting. Ruben looking at Consuelo and then at Sandra, expressed his surprise. "This is an incredible story, hard to believe." Consuelo, her voice choked with emotion, said, "I never imagined something like this could be happening in my life. It's so much to take in." Sandra, with tears in her eyes, nodded. "I know, dear. It's a shock for all of us." Then she added, "Despite everything he did, I asked for your father to be taken to a care facility. There, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. He will spend the rest of his life there." Ruben, trying to understand the situation better, asked, "You did that even after everything he did to you and Consuelo?" Sandra sighed deeply and replied, "Yes. Despite everything, he is a sick human being who deserves compassion. I spent years filled with rage towards him, but today, seeing my daughter here in front of me, the happiness I feel is overwhelming. I can't think of anything negative from here on." Consuelo looked at Sandra, a feeling of gratitude mixed with confusion in her heart. "Thank you for that, Sandra. I'm still trying to understand everything, but I appreciate that you took care of him despite everything he did to me. He is still my father." After these emotional revelations and encounters, Consuelo's life changed dramatically. She began visiting Sandra's house regularly, and both of them worked hard to build the relationship they had lost. During one of her frequent visits to Sandra's house, Consuelo, feeling the joy of a new beginning. In a moment of intimate conversation, Sandra expressed her hopes for Consuelo's future. "You've always had an interest in studying more, haven't you, Consuelo?" she asked, serving herself on the terrace of her spacious home. With a hopeful gleam in her eyes, Consuelo replied, "Yes, I've always dreamed of studying architecture, but I never had the opportunity." Sandra smiled warmly. "Then I think it's time to make that dream come true. I want you to enroll in the best architecture school in the country. I'll take care of everything." Consuelo was speechless for a moment, overwhelmed with emotion. "You would do that for me? I don't know how to thank you," she said, tears of gratitude forming in her eyes. Sandra reached across the table and took Consuelo's hand. "After all we've lost, it's the least I can do. And there's more," Sandra continued. "I'm building a room for Clary here at the house. I want to be part of her life and not miss a moment, something I unfortunately missed with you." Consuelo, now openly crying, felt a mix of happiness and relief. "That means so much to me, Sandra. Clary will be thrilled to have a grandmother like you." During one of their many warm encounters, the conversation took an emotionally deep turn. While Clary played in the garden, Sandra confided to Consuelo, "My greatest dream after finding you would be to be called Mother by you. But I understand this is all very recent, and I respect your time. I'll do everything I can to earn that title." Moved by Sandra's words, Consuelo replied sincerely, "You are already doing so much, Sandra. I appreciate every gesture. I'm sure we will grow closer as time goes on." As time passed, their relationship naturally and organically strengthened. Consuelo regularly visited Sandra's house, where Clary enjoyed spending time. The little girl, completely at ease in Sandra's presence, filled the house with laughter and joy, creating a family atmosphere that had long been missing in both Sandra's and Consuelo's lives. Several years later, Consuelo, now nearing the end of her architecture course, was preparing for her graduation day. She had faced many challenges and overcome countless adversities and was about to celebrate a significant milestone in her life. The graduation ceremony was filled with professors, family, and friends, all gathered to witness Consuelo's success. As she walked down the aisle towards the stage, Consuelo felt a mix of pride and gratitude. Her eyes searched the audience for three special people: her husband, who had always supported her unconditionally, her father-in-law, who had become a constant father figure in her life, and of course Sandra, her biggest supporter in architecture. As she climbed the stage, Consuelo looked at the audience and began her speech. "Today, I am here not only because of my efforts, but also thanks to the invaluable support of some very special people," she said, her voice filled with emotion. She continued, "My husband, who has always been by my side, encouraging me to reach my goals. My father-in-law, who welcomed me as a daughter and gave me strength during difficult times." Then her eyes found Sandra, and she paused before saying, "And of course, my dear mother, Sandra. Mom, you gave me more than the opportunity to study. You gave me a home, love, and the family I always wished for." Consuelo's words deeply touched everyone present, but especially Sandra, who couldn't contain her tears. She covered her face with her hands, overwhelmed with emotion upon hearing Consuelo call her mom. When Consuelo finished her speech, Sandra was visibly moved, tears streaming down her face. Consuelo's words touched her heart in a way she had never experienced before. She felt a wave of love, gratitude, and a deep sense of fulfillment. The years of searching, the pain of separation, and the uncertainty had finally led to a moment of pure joy and connection. As soon as the ceremony ended, Sandra approached Consuelo and they embraced tightly, a hug that sealed years of distance and solidified their relationship. "My daughter," Sandra whispered, "you have completed me in a way I never imagined possible." Holding Sandra, Consuelo responded, "Mom, you showed me the true meaning of family and love. I am so grateful for everything." They left the graduation ceremony hand in hand, feeling renewed and full of hope for the future. Both knew that from that moment on, their lives would be immensely happier. Their story was a testament to the fact that maternal love surpasses all barriers and that a mother never gives up on her child, no matter what life brings. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe to our channel. This helps us continue to bring you incredible stories, time and time again. Don't miss the next story, coming up on your screen soon. Thank you for your support. See you soon.